Hey guys, Kev here. I wanted to give my first impressions on the Giantmouse Ace Grand that I recently got on a trade with a buddy. So I wanted to talk about that. And first I wanted to mention that I've had this knife in before. This was before I started the channel. My buddy Jake, shout out to Bearded Gear. He sent me his Ace Grand, Malibu, ProTech Malibu, and Quiet Carry Waypoint, so I could check those out. And I actually now own all three of those, so that tells you that we have some similar taste. And he's a really good buddy for letting me check it out. And at the time, I actually wasn't a fan of this knife. I thought it was a little bit big. I thought it was a little clunky. I thought lock bar access was terrible for a lefty. I thought it was heavy. I just wasn't a huge fan of it overall. And it's interesting because I recently bought a Giantmouse Ace Nimbus version 2 when they dropped, because I figured I kind of like the design. And they go so fast, I figured I'd grab one, see if I liked it, and then I could always sell it if I didn't. And I got that in the first day. I opened it a couple times. The action was so stiff, it just wasn't comfortable in hand. And I basically shipped it right off to my buddy Kyle. Shout out to DTOM Knives and Gear, so he could review it. And then he sent it on to Jake, Bearded Gear, for review. And I told both of those guys, if you want it, let me know. I'll sell it to you for what I paid, which was $175, I think. And neither of them opted to buy that knife. They also had the same kind of concerns that I did, issues that I did with it. It's a great work knife. It is a good knife. It's just not for me. And it turns out it wasn't for those guys either. So when I got it back, I was going to pop it on Knife Swap and sell it. And when I do that, I always chat with my buddy Ethan. He's a fellow lefty, and we have very similar tastes in knives. I've bought and traded knives with him. Bought knives from him, sold him knives. I've traded knives with him before a few times. So at this point, I always check with him first and say, hey, I'm going to post this. Are you interested? Do you have anything you want to trade? That sort of thing. And he said, well, I'm actually interested in the Nimbus, and I was going to post, he told me a couple knives, and one of them was the Giantmouse Ace Grand. And they both go for the same price, $175, $185, something like that. So I said, hey, you want to do an even swap? And we could both check out the other knife. Worst case scenario, we don't like them. And we could just sell them for what we were going to get anyway. So that's what we did. And he got the Ace Nimbus version 2, and I got the Ace Grand, again, in hand, but this time it's mine. And I'm going to spend a little more time with it, carry it a lot, and see what I ultimately think and do a full review on it. But for now, I just wanted to give my first impressions. So I honestly think that this is a good looking knife. I think that it has very good action. Now, I will admit that Ethan did some kind of magic on this thing, because he always takes his knives apart. He's one of those kind of OCD guys who always takes a knife apart right when he gets it, you know. I do that sometimes, depending on the knife. If it has good action or feels like it'll break in, I just let it go. But if I feel like I can improve it, I'll take it apart. But he took it apart. I think he polished the washers or bearings. I'm not sure. This looks like it's on bearings, so it looks like he may have polished the bearings, added some KPL in there. He definitely smoothed it out somehow, because you can see how phenomenal this action is. And I think he Loctited the pivot, because Giantmouse knives tend to come a little bit loose on the pivot over time. So just Loctiting that down always helps. And the action is phenomenal on this. There is no blade play, vertical or horizontal, that I can feel at all. It basically drops shut. One nitpick, not even nitpick, one issue I have with this knife is the detent is very, very soft. So you can see there, I can just roll it out like this, or I can flick it out with the thumb. I can middle finger flick it. So it's good that you can do all that stuff, but you can easily just kind of, you know, I can throw it out. I can easily deploy the knife like this. So the detent's very soft, which is not the best thing. I do like that I can just roll it out like that with my thumb. Normally, when a detent is a bit stiffer, you can't do that. It'll kind of pop out and then your finger's hanging down here and you can cut yourself. So it's nice that I can just roll it out, but it's a bit of a soft detent. Sometimes when I close it, it pops off of here and opens again, and then it sits like this. And then I just have to close it again. So it's kind of a negative with a slight positive that you can roll it out like that with your thumb. So there's the detent. The ergonomics are very good on this knife. I like how my full hand fits on the knife, but my 3 fingers are in this area right here. My first 3 fingers, and then my pinky rests right on this flat spot right here. So they designed this perfectly. So your hand fits on there very comfortably. You have this little guard here, and then you just rest your thumb right here, which that's something I want to bring up is the jimping. You can see, like on most Giantmouse knives or even Vox designs, they have the jimping right here, about halfway, a third of the way up the blade, right? Which a lot of people like because when you're choked up on the blade, in this case, you have to choke up to here, put your finger on this guard, and then when you put your thumb down, it's right on that jimping, right? But what I don't like is when I'm in the normal grip, which I'm assuming is that you're supposed to hold the knife because they give you this flat spot for your pinky and the swell in for your other 3 fingers, I have no jimping here. So I don't know if that's on purpose because they figure in this grip, you're locked in, you don't really need jimping, and when you're up here, you want that added control, I guess. Honestly, I would prefer the jimping back here on this knife. I don't know how it would look, but I wouldn't even mind having jimping here and here in 2 spots. I'm a guy who doesn't mind jimping. I actually like it in a lot of cases, so that's something I wanted to point out. The pocket clip on here is fully deep carry. It goes all the way to the back of the knife, which is very good. It pops in and out of the pocket very well, so it's a good clip. Your lanyard hole here is out of the way. I didn't even really realize it was there until I just pointed at it, so that's good. You have a titanium, I'm assuming this is titanium back spacer, which is very nice, helps reduce the weight because there are steel liners throughout inside of this green micarta handle scales. So it's a very sturdy knife. It is not overly heavy. See, when I originally had Jake's, one of my complaints was that it was heavy and kind of clunky. So I don't know if I've recently just gotten used to bigger knives, but it feels great in hand. It doesn't feel heavy in the pocket. It actually feels like a good weight. Something else I wanted to point out was if you look here at the back here, it almost looks like there was supposed to be a flipper tab. And I wonder if maybe they had it designed with a flipper tab and then realized that with the detent, it wasn't going to work, because that's one of the big issues they had with the Biblio at first. And they really had to figure out how to dial that detent in their in the other models they came out with, variations of the Biblio. So I think maybe they were thinking about doing a flipper and then cut it off, but I can't be sure. It just kind of looks like that is all. The cutout here for your thumb is Giantmouse style. It is very intuitive. It functions very well for both thumb and for middle finger flicking, which is my preferred way of opening this knife. That is pretty much it for my initial thoughts on this. I've really come around to this knife. It's starting to become one of my favorites. The blade is very slicey, comes down to a really good thin edge, but it has a working blade or a working edge on there. The spine is crowned very nicely, like most Italian-made knives are. I believe this is made by Fox in Italy, Maniago, Italy. So yeah, it's a really cool knife. I'm really enjoying having it a second time around, and that brings me to kind of a final thought. Try not to judge a knife immediately upon opening the box and your first couple flips or carrying it for an hour. Try to give it some time. I am very guilty of that, and I judged this knife way too harshly, way too quickly, and I'm so happy that I got it a second time around and am able to really enjoy it, and just appreciate it for what it is, which most people already know. This is a great knife. So, full review coming. Oh, you know what? One last thing I want to point out, the access to the lock bar. It's pretty good right-handed. You can get in there with your thumb and disengage very easily, but left-handed, it is a little bit awkward. It takes a little bit of getting used to really fidget with it, but you do get used to it, and it is fine, but I maybe would have preferred a little bit more access to the lock bar there. So that's the last thing. I really appreciate you guys watching. Hope you stick around for the full review later, and I hope you have a wonderful day. Stay sharp.